Sokoban, a game you're probably familiar with even if you don't know it by that name. Sokoban is an old Japanese game that was released in 1982 that has been a foundation for puzzles and video games since. As a game, it can be defined by three main points: grid-based, block pushing, puzzle game. Somewhat recently, there's been a renaissance of games inspired by Sokoban that use these three main points but have some sort of twist or variant on the game. The most well-known of these variants is Baba Is You, a game where the rules of the level are themselves blocks that can be moved around and pushed. But there have been countless others that you may have heard of, such as Patrick's Parabox, Snakebird, A Monster's Expedition, or Can of Wormholes. But there's another name besides Sokoban that you'll always see when digging up the inspiration behind these games.
Well, so right around the time The Witness came out, a couple months later, a game came out called Steven Sausage Roll, which sounds like a very silly name. Um, it really is one of the best puzzle games ever made.
Steven's Sausage Roll. What is this game and how did it define a genre? Steven's Sausage Roll is a Sokoban variant about pushing sausages onto grills. You play as this little polygonal dude, who I'm just going to call Steven, and your goal in every level is to push the sausages onto grills such that they're cooked evenly. This means cooking all four parts of the sausage. At first glance, this game doesn't really have an interesting twist on Sokoban at all. At least not as interesting as a game like Baba Is You or Patrick's Parabox, for example. But the secret of Steven's Sausage Roll is that it's Sokoban squared, or Sokoban times 2. In Sokoban, you play as a one-tiled character moving one-tiled blocks onto a goal one time. In Steven's Sausage Roll, you play as a two-tiled character, Steven and the fork, moving two-tiled sausages onto grills 4 times. So that's something. Still not really interesting though. Certainly not interesting enough to be this game that inspires so many others. But where Steven's Sausage Roll's magic comes from is how it introduces mechanics through level design. Alright, so let's run through the very beginning of Steven's Sausage Roll. So you start off on this island, and you have to move to get to the sign that tells you how to move, which is kind of hilarious. When we start up a level from the first area of the game, we can see the player themselves, the sausages, the grills, the ground tiles you stand on, and the water, which acts as an obstacle the player has to avoid putting the sausages in. If we go back into the hub area and move up a little bit, we can see this ladder up here. And that's it. For the rest of its 30-hour runtime, the game will never add another object. It manages to create a fully fledged experience with just these 6. Here's how it does it. The first thing to note is that while 6 objects isn't a lot, the amount of potential interactions between 6 objects is a lot. And these 6 objects, while seemingly simple, actually have a lot of mechanics packed inside of them, particularly Steven and the sausages. So first, let's take a look at the player character. Because of the nature of the character being 2 tiles long instead of 1 tile, we have to deal with rotation. So pressing forwards does move you forwards and pressing backwards does move you backwards, but pressing relatively left or relatively right rotates you in the corresponding direction. This is actually extremely powerful because it allows you to push sausages that would otherwise be inaccessible. This also has the added consequence of making forwards and backwards movement functionally different, since sometimes you need to move backwards to ensure that your fork rotates from the right point. The sausages themselves are similarly complex. Every time you push a sausage, it rolls onto its other side. This means that one grill can't cook an entire sausage because trying to push the sausage onto that grill will always roll it onto the same side, burning it, which is another lose state. This means that sausages will be the same orientation on every other tile. So through these simple objects, we already have an interesting level of complexity that the game can explore through its puzzles. And I want to note that some of the mechanics that I mentioned, such as the forwards-backwards thing and the sausage flipping thing, aren't mechanics that were explicitly built into the game. They are emergent mechanics, mechanics that emerge as a consequence of another mechanic. In this case, the forwards-backwards thing is a consequence of the fact that you can rotate. And the sausage flipping thing is a consequence of the fact that the sausages roll. But this stuff isn't interesting enough to fill a 30-hour game. So let's move on to the real twist of Steven's Sausage Roll. After you finish all the levels in the first area of the game, a sausage will appear in the hub map. You can use that sausage to build a bridge here and walk along it to the next area of the game. Upon entering the first level of this new area, we see something that we haven't seen in any other level before: ground tiles being used as walls. Every single level in the first area of the game was designed without using the ground tiles as walls, instead opting to use the water as a barrier for the player. Remember how I was talking about these 6 objects having a lot of interactions between them? Well, up until this point, we haven't been able to see the interaction between the wall and the sausage. So by pressing a sausage up against a wall, the sausage gets skewered by the fork. This completely changes your movement, allowing you to strafe in all 4 directions instead of rotating. Until, of course, you dislodge the sausage from your fork by pressing it against another wall. And while skewering, the sausages no longer roll, completely shattering the sausage flipping rule from before, allowing you to cook a sausage with only one grill. Which, of course, is a level. Suddenly the game has introduced an entirely new mechanic with its own set of emergent mechanics, while also shattering pre-established rules you thought you knew about the game. Except the game didn't introduce a new mechanic, it just designed its previous levels in a way where this interaction wasn't available to you. The mechanic always existed, you just hadn't discovered it until now, and the game pulls this exact same trick 4 more times. A question to ask would be, what's the point? Why not just introduce new level objects to introduce new mechanics like every other game? Why go through all this effort just to introduce a new mechanic? Does doing it this way really add anything meaningful to the player experience? Steven's Sausage Roll is first and foremost a game, and games are supposed to be fun. Steven's Sausage Roll is a puzzle game, which means it seeks to evoke this fun through the aha moment. Deducing the puzzle, putting the pieces together, figuring it out. That's the feeling that Steven's Sausage Roll wants to evoke in its players. And by introducing the mechanics this way, you're letting the player feel like they discovered them. You're letting the player feel like the mechanic was right under their nose and they just figured out how to do it. It also makes the mechanics of the game feel deep. You're not just introducing a bunch of shallow mechanics that you're only going to use 1 or 2 times. You're introducing a bunch of very complex and rich, deep mechanics that will be used throughout the entire game. Since its release in 2016, many developers have tried to follow in the footsteps of Steven's Sausage Roll. Nearly every sokoban variant you see today will have some level of sausageness in it. It'll try to introduce mechanics in the same way Steven's Sausage Roll did, but none of them do it quite the way it did. This game is a masterclass in less is more. With just 4 buttons, up, down, left, right, and 6 level objects, it's able to achieve more than most games could even dream of. Instead of adding a bunch of fluff and nothing, Steven's Sausage Roll focuses on the stuff it has and digs deep into them. This game leaves no corner of its system unturned. Any interaction you could think of between these 6 objects, the game already has a puzzle about it. The game expects the player to master the system. You finish this game not only having completed it, but understanding all the inner workings of it. And that's how Steven Sausage Roll defined a genre. And with that, I will see you next time.